are here today. And as a reminder, I think we only have like 3 more sessions together. And I think end of finals is in August. I think it's like the 7th of August, something like that, is when finals. Does that sound right to you guys?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. Because I'm trying to find a calendar that will actually give us a little bit more detail. Okay. Okay, because the new semester, people are going to start coming in for the new semester August 14th. And the first day of classes for me in fall is Thursday, August 20th, which usually means the grades are due about the 11th, which means the last day of finals should be on the 7th. And I'm thinking I want to meet for the last time on August 4th is what I'm thinking. That's going to be right in the middle of finals, but what that what that day will be is whoever shows up, whoever watches it, but it will not be counted against people who don't watch it. So it'd be like an extra credit type of thing, and that's when we'll talk through stuff and answer final questions and stuff like that. And so today, what I wanted to do is talk about um, the last couple modules for one thing, reiterate how, we've kind of thrown away the due dates for the last couple weeks of the semester. I don't want anybody to worry about those. And then the final projects and getting stuff done. When is everything going to have to finally be done? And so we're going to see samples of the final opinion essay that people are going to do, as well as samples of the final AI project that people are going to do for their Sundiata stuff. And I want to iterate a couple things. One is I really appreciate you guys, Nicole and Susan, who come in live because it is so much less boring for me to have a human face to talk to. But also, it's nice to have that interaction because you guys let me know a little bit about what folks are actually concerned about regarding the modules, and the successes that people are having. And as a reminder for everybody who watches this, if you do attend live, you do get extra credit points as long as you remind me when you do your attendance that you attended live. That's one thing. Another thing is I want to remind people too that even when you see a zero, that on an assignment, that zero is to remind you to finish the assignment and turn it in. I've had a couple people this semester who have been really, really good about looking at the assignments, looking at the things that I've said about what's working, what's not working, going back and reworking their stuff and resubmitting. And when that happens, every time that happens, hi Paige, every time that happens, you guys do get better scores. Except there's been a couple times where people just resubmitted the same thing, then that doesn't really help. And that was just a mistake. But so going back and submitting things that have not been submitted and resubmitting is really, really important. There is no reason that everybody can't get an A in this class because you're graded by how well you respond to the assignment, not whether or not you are, a gifted artisan. Because this class is not for people that are already professional artists for the last 40 years. Um, you're graded on whether or not you follow directions and try, rather than whether or not it looks astonishing. And what's interesting to me though is when you guys do follow the directions and try, more often than not, it does end up looking really, really good. We've had some really great um, submissions for the surrealist stuff. So we're going to talk about those things too. And I want to reiterate about the uh, abstract assignment as well as the Dada and Surrealist assignment. So we're going to talk about all those things. Let's see, I'm going to, I did start recording, right? Okay, good. Because I have done an entire hour and a half without recording anything. And that felt really, that made me feel really dumb. So how are you doing, Paige? Can you use your microphone and talk to us? Or are you only going to be able to
Yeah, I
type
can.
in? You can? Okay, excellent.
Yeah, I'm not at work today.
Okay, great. Now, how many of you guys have submitted stuff after a zero shows up or have resubmitted stuff after I told you what to fix?
I have.
You have? Did you end up getting a
I
better
have to.
score? And Paige, you
Yes.
did too? Okay. Paige, did you end up getting a better score as well?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. All right. So, um, and several people have done that. I really appreciate that. And 99 times out of 100, when you guys resubmit, you look at what I've written and make the changes according to what I've written. And I really appreciate that. That is, I've done classes like this. Like last semester, I did a sculpture class where there was one person that kept showing up that just argued with me the entire time. And I don't know if what I said made her mad, but she quit showing up after a while. And I was shocked. It didn't really hurt my feelings all that bad, but it was aggravating because it doesn't really matter if you are a professional artist taking this class or any classes at the university. If the teacher has created an outline of stuff and the university trusts the teacher to follow through and complete the promise given by the class outline and follow through with the university parameters for the class, then there's going to be so much less frustration on the part of the student just by doing what the teachers is having you do in the assignments. I don't know if I told you guys, but um, when the Earth's crust was cooling and I was in my art degree courses, I was getting really irritated at some of my teachers that were so absurdly stupid because I knew I could do a better job than them. And I remember, and I was struggling with a couple teachers that wanted, I was doing a professional writing class and a computer science class and a couple other things. And I was, my mom was living right next door. She was working at the university that I was attending. And I remember my mom, after a couple of weeks, was getting so irritated at my whining that she finally said, "You're paying people to give you these answers. And whether or not you like the answers doesn't matter. The university is recognizing their grades, their grading. And so if you want to get your degree, you're going to do what the teacher tells you to do and make the changes that the teacher wants you to change." And I thought about that and it really irritated me, but I realized that is entirely true. Whether or not I get frustrated with what the teacher wants is aside the point. And I have even developed several assignments that people go through and do, and they don't realize until 3 weeks later that the purpose of the assignment was not what they were doing. It was something completely different. And sometimes the teacher, the university trusts that the teacher is going to do these things professionally. And it's so much easier for the student as you go in your professional career to just do what the teacher tells you to do, whether or not you like it. And I haven't really had that experience with people in this class, but in previous years, like the attendance assignment is pretty straightforward. You write down 5 things that you learned during the course of the video. That's it, period, or attendance. But I had somebody who wrote a synopsis of the entire module. And I said, no, you don't get credit for attendance because doesn't validate that you attended. You have to, name my shirt color. Did I get a haircut? Can you hear the dogs whining? Those things validate that you were actually watching the video. I don't care about synopsis, an AI helping you write a synopsis of the entire module. And the guy rewrote it like 3 times and finally told me, hey, my mom thinks it's great. She thought that this was really good. And I said, bless her heart, that's wonderful. I'm glad that your mom likes it, but you're not following the directions. And yeah, so that person kind of dropped out, which was nice for everybody. I'm sure. How many of you guys have had students like that in classes of yours where it just their presence makes it really hard for you to participate just because they're so annoying? How many of you have had that? Yeah, Susan, Paige, Nicole, have you had to deal with that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I'm I'm just so glad that we're not dealing with that this semester. I can't tell you how grateful I am. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to blather. Um, Nicole, Paige, Susan, please chime in when you feel you need to or to ask a question at any point. Okay. Then, okay. Hold on a sec. Okay, Lizzie's here now. That's awesome. Hi, Lizzie. If your microphone works, I just invited everybody as we go through stuff. Feel free to ask questions as we're going through stuff. Okay, here we go.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, you are welcome. Okay, so I think one of the things that I want to do too is I want to share with you guys examples that other people have done with the painting from life, because not a lot of people have done the Impressionist painting. And I thought it would be a good idea to talk about that a little bit as well and just show you some examples is all. So I'm going to go to that really quick, and then we're going to talk again about abstraction and some of the other stuff. So let's see. Give me just a quick minute here as I find this. Oh, and before we go too, I don't know if it was Paige. I think it may have been Paige who was asking me, but a couple of different people emailed me about the peer review. There's 2 assignments that said, in order for full credit, you need to do peer review. I can't get it to work. I don't know how to get it to work. So don't worry about it. You'll get those points. Just don't worry about the peer review. Was it you that had asked me?
Nope, not this time.
Okay. All right. Hold on a second. That was not the right window. Pulling it up. Okay. Here we go. Okay. I want to show you just a couple samples of the painting from life. And I really, really like this one. When you do the painting from life, you need to take a fruit, draw the outline as big as your page. We're not worried about it looking exact or photographic or anything. What we're worried about is, putting paint on there, putting colors on there, doing stuff, paying attention to the shapes of the areas of the colors that you're applying and the different variations of color. And this is a great example. You probably all tell that this is a green apple. But what I love about this is the person did a sketch, an outline of an apple. They set it on a shirt, but instead of trying to get everything exact, they saw that this area was one kind of green, This area was another kind of green. These two areas were different kinds of green, and they applied the paint in those areas. They put some white on top of it for a highlight, and they were more worried about getting areas of color down than they were about making it look like an apple. And the reason why that is successful is that's how the Impressionists were thinking. Because the Impressionists, the reason why the movement was called Impressionism was because they were trying very hard not to share something that was realistic that anybody could access. They were trying to share their own unique take on whatever it was. Now, this one is a star fruit. I know this because we did it in class. But I want you to look at this. I chose the star fruit because so few people know what it actually looks like. And this person, again, instead of drawing the star fruit, because she didn't know what it was, she drew the shapes of the different colors. And so, she made a yellow line here and a brown line there and a green line here. And drawing those areas of color, as she painted those areas of color, then the fruit kind of magically appeared. And if it doesn't, that's fine. I don't care. What I care about is making the areas of color. Are you guys kind of understanding what's going on here? This is why it's called Impressionism. And I'm just
Yeah, I
going
get it.
to, okay. And I want you to show you some more examples. And this is a really good one. Okay, this person took a photo of the apple itself. And then when they started painting, again, they started, this lady told me that what she started was doing was she drew the green area and then painted the darkest greens and the lightest greens, went on, painted the darkest reds and the lightest reds, and then went back with other paint and kind of blended stuff together just because it was kind of fun. And I mean, that's a really cool looking apple. And it's interesting that it does look so much like what the Impressionists did, because that's exactly what the process that they went through. And this guy, he had a really, really hard time. Um, this was a lime that he brought, but he had a really hard time because he kept trying to draw a lime. And we finally said, okay, well, what's the coolest area of color? And he really liked this shape right here. It looked like somebody, a thumbs up mitten. And so I said, okay, well, draw that. That's going to be your lightest spot. And then what's your darkest spot? And so he started making this kind of area right here. And once he filled those in, then he just started playing around. And it emerged. I mean, who cares if this is a lime or not? Now that you know that it's a lime, you can see the lime. But other than that, it just looks like kind of a fun shape. And I think I'm only going to show you guys like one or two others. And these ones that I've shown you are ones, or the ones that I've already shown you are ones that people did who did not consider themselves to be artists at all. And when they followed the directions, something happened on their paper so that it looked like a painting that their parents could recognize. Okay. I think this is the last one I'm gonna show you. Okay, you can tell what this is. What this person did is they found a picture of a banana online and they drew a grid over it like we did in one of those early assignments. And then sketching that grid on their paper, they enlarged the banana so that it filled up their paper. And after all they did was they drew the outline and the outline of the shadow. And then the person just started sketching where the darkest browns were, where the green was, and just a couple little lines. And then they started applying the colors in those areas. And this is what emerged. And I think that's fantastic. And this person was shocked, literally shocked. They had no idea that it would look like this, and they were amazed. They thought it looked great. I don't care about the grid lines or anything like that, but this, you look at this bit banana painting, just paying attention to the shapes of the colors used, it looks fantastic. Right, does anybody have any observations or questions about what we just saw?
No, they're all really good.
Does that help you guys in understanding this assignment?
Yes.
Okay. Because I am a lot more concerned. I'm a lot more interested in seeing the shapes of the colors that you use as opposed to whether or not we can identify, what kind of fruit it is. I could care less about that. What I am interested is I want you just to explore the areas and shapes of the color. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about a little bit is I'm going to again I'm going to share my screen. But Nicole, Paige, Lizzie, does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it does. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. We talked about Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism, and I put all those little short videos in for people. Most of the written reflections have been pretty good, but there have been a couple that have read more like you're asking AI to write you 120 words about these three things. And just Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism were early 20th century art movements that redirected how people thought about art. Well, that doesn't really help at all. We talked about Dada, Cubism, and Surrealism briefly, each separately. And so at least one sentence on what Dada was, one sentence on what Cubism was, and one sentence on what Surrealism was. That's how you get all the points for the reflection. So, and surrealist strategies, I just wanted to go over this. And I'd like you guys' feedback. Uh, going through this, exquisite corpse was what the surrealists and Dadaists called their meetings. And instead of get-togethers or block parties, they called them exquisite corpse just because like everything else the Dadaists did, it's designed specifically to unsettle people. It's not what you're expecting. And for this, the sentences that you come up with, I went through this whole routine specifically so that you would come up with 5 sentences that were almost a random agglomeration of words. That's why you needed to follow these directions. Then after doing the 5 drawings, and that doesn't matter to me how quote unquote good or bad they are, but the drawings need to respond to the 5 sentences. Then you mix them up, the sentences up, so that they become randomized titles for the 5 drawings that you did. Does everybody understand that part of it?
I think I misunderstood that. So we're just randomizing, putting the words back and drawing out different ones? Is that
Well, no.
what? Okay.
You're making 5 sentences of randomized words. And the 5 sentences, you're going to mix up the adjectives, the nouns, the adverbs, and the verbs. So you have things like, the hairy pickle ran softly around the building, stuff like that. It's designed to be a random collection of verbs and nouns, and then descriptors for them that don't normally go together. So you have 5 sentences like that. And after drawing something for each of those 5 sentences, then you move the sentences around so the sentences that you have now attach to different drawings. Does that make sense? Like if you had 2 sentences, one was the hairy banana climbed a tall building, and the other one was the purple gorilla ate a tire, and you drew drawings for both of those, then you would switch the titles. So now the hairy banana one would be labeled with the gorilla sentence.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and it's specifically designed not to make sense, but yeah, I appreciate what you said. It's supposed to be confusing. And then that's what this is. I'm trying to do that for that. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do before the next time I teach this is make a video of me going through the process. Because usually when I do this, we actually go through the entire process in a live class, and it makes a lot more sense. And then this talks about mixing up the drawings and the titles. So if you have sentences 1 through 5, drawings 1 through 5, then you mix the sentences up so that the title for drawing 3 becomes sentence number 1, the drawing for number 4 becomes sentence number 2, etc. And then these ones, everybody who's done this seems that they really understood what this assignment was about. Because I was hoping that everybody had done this at one point, and you're just supposed to do 3 drawings. And if you do this with other people helping you, so other people are drawing, then that becomes a lot more fun. And you can just decide which of your drawings you're going to actually submit as your own. And usually when I do this, or when people do this in groups, they just submit the ones with the heads that they drew as their own. And that's fine. But I wanted to share with you, let's see. I wanted to share with you this from another class, and just some samples of what they did. Let's see. For the Surrealist Strategies assignment. I'm sorry, the first one I went to show you, they didn't have, I'm having a hard time finding the drawings. Okay. All right, this is a good one. Okay, so this is the sentence that they put as the new title. And look at that banana. And I think I shared this last week. As you go down, it's pretty obvious that the dramatic banana slowly stares suspiciously. It looks like this sentence actually goes to this drawing, and they just mixed it. And now we go down to this one, and they had other ones too, but you can see that this is their 3-part drawings where they drew the heads, mixed them up, bodies, and then the bottoms, the feet, or the feet. Sorry, and you can see that they did all that. And then we had some more of these. So the invisible toaster aggressively argues yesterday. This is a drawing of 2 pigeons, and so it looks like that drawing of pigeons. Maybe, yeah, here it is. The soggy pigeon awkwardly whispers. This was the sentence that described what became this drawing. So you see how they mix that up? And regardless, the sentences still make absolutely no sense. I believe it or not, when I was in high school, I was a fan of Dada theater, or Dada literature. And I don't understand why I ever thought that was amazing, because it's not. It's terrible. It's horrible. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then we look at this. The person did the drawings, but they didn't mix up the sentences. And so, you can see the different drawings, and that when doing this, I took off points and I said, okay, you got to go back through and resubmit this so that these sentences go to different drawings. And this person never did that, so they lost those points. And if it takes you guys 15 minutes to go back through and resubmit something with, following my directions, take the 15 minutes. You've already done the rest of the work. Might as well do the what you need to so that you get all the points. Okay, and then this person, this is their drawing, three-part drawings. Again, these drawings make no sense. They're supposed to not make sense. And then this is the five drawings, and you can see that in this case they did mix up the sentences. So the yellow shoe tiredly drank. That's what this drawing is. Do you guys need me to show you any more examples, or do you got it? Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. All right. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to go back and, oh, what am I doing? Here we go. There we go. I do want to talk a little bit about abstraction again, because so a couple people have turned stuff in, but they weren't paying attention to the directions too much. And I've been kind of dragging my feet to grade that, but I will have to grade them and just tell them, hey, you've got to redo this. And I'll tell you what's going on. We go to the studio abstraction. Oh, but before we do that, if you guys look at one of the assignments was the sexism, the gender bias in art. And what I'm really pleased with it, I'm not looking for, I don't want to make people feel a certain way politically or anything like that, but I do want you to be aware that in the 50s and 60s there was a very specific gender bias through the art world. And we talked about that a little bit last week. And this was it's a controversial subject, or potentially controversial, but it's interesting to me that everybody did a really good job talking through the subject when they removed emotion from it by applying Feldman's model of critique. And I think that this is one of those things. And also when we talked about George Floyd and the kente cloth demonstration, when we're talking about cultural appropriation and stuff like that, when you guys follow an application of the four tools of artistic critique, it is so much easier to communicate ideas because you don't get blocked up with getting upset about stuff. You're able to describe and people understand what you're describing. You're able to analyze and talk about stuff in an articulate way without kicking sand at each other or calling people names. And I wish that more people would follow this kind of routine, because then you're actually able to communicate thoughts and observations as opposed to just screaming emotions at each other. Have you guys noticed that as you go through these exercises using the tools of artistic critique? Has anybody had an opportunity to use these tools to help diffuse the situation? Well, I last semester I was in a class. It was for nursing students, and I just a couple of the people, the heads of the nursing program here at Utah Tech, are some of the most fantastic teachers I've ever seen. And I just love, occasionally I'll sit in the back of their classes just to watch them, because it's fantastic. It's amazing. And I watched one of the department heads was doing a class, and a couple of people were getting really emotional, and starting to get upset. Something I could see any second somebody's gonna pull out their phone and start making a TikTok video or something. And she was able to talk through and sound back, okay, and describe to them what they were saying, and that calmed them down a little bit. And then she went through and talked about why they were thinking that, trying to understand why they were thinking that, gave them an opportunity to express why they were thinking that calmed them down even more. Then they talked about extrapolating meaning. What does this actually mean for you? That calmed them down even more. And by the time the talk went to, what are these observations successful? The people were able to weed out the emotional aspect of what their observations and really clarify what they had been trying to articulate without getting upset. And it was amazing to watch. So I just thought that was very cool. And I've seen that happen many times. So anyway, going to the abstraction. In the studio abstraction, notice no stick figures or identifiable objects. Identifiable objects are things like heart symbols or thumbs up or hands. And the reason we put this there is to kind of force you away from making those kinds of things that where your art then becomes a sign instead of the art that you're trying to make. And it's not important to me that you're able to effectively communicate to everybody what you're trying to say in these paintings. I don't care about that. What I care about is you going through the process of making something with no stick figures, no identifiable objects, doing different things to the objects that you made, specifically so that uh, you kind of get what people are doing when they're abstracting. And that's the point. I It's not about making sure that somebody else feels exactly what you felt when you made the painting. I think when art tries too hard to do that, it misses the whole point. Art at the core is communication without the fetters that we pull around ourselves when we use language. And it's really important to remember that you're processing communication. You're not telling somebody else exactly what you're thinking. You're saying something, and just like any good conversation, they're going to pick up what they want to and what they need to out of that conversation. Okay, so I want to show you some examples that other classes have done with this assignment. And I think that this is a really good example. And I can tell you what the emotions are, and you'll probably agree with them. But what was really kind of fun to see on this is that this person, I'm gonna turn it so we're seeing them right side up. What's really fun about this is that this person looked at the psychology of color as well and used that in their things. Would you say that these top two emotions, do you think they're towards the happy spectrum or what? What do you think these kinds of emotions might be? The top two.
Anger for sure.
Yeah, I think that there's some anger in there in one of those. And
Yeah.
but I get that because of the shapes of the lines that she's making, the shapes of the shapes she's making. And how it feels like this one feels a lot more smoothly made. This one feels like it's a lot more hurried. And I look here on the left, this feels more contemplative. And on the bottom right, this feels a lot more calm. And a lot of it is because of the shapes of the color fields in the paintings and the colors themselves. So, and that's what we're going for. We're looking for shapes and color. We're not looking for a sign that tells you how to feel a certain way. Or, this is a stick figure telling us a story. And I'm gonna bring you to another one that I want to show you. Yeah, okay, this is a really good example of the process. Okay, if we look at this, this is their three thumbnails for each of the different emotions. And what this person did, and I think you probably kind of see it a little bit, like on this one, they actually drew somebody running, somebody running in fear. And since we can't use stick figures, what they did then is they rotated it. This is actually the person's elbow, I believe, and this is their hair flowing behind them. They rotated it, picked a point, and blew it up. And so suddenly we can't tell what this is at all. If I tell you this is an elbow, this is the hair flowing behind them as they run, then you can get that. And if I tell you that, you can also tell that they rotated this to get and blew it blew up the elbow so you could see that. And I don't know if you can tell, but each of these look like this is started off as a stick figure. This was the head. These were the hands of the stick figure, and this artist blew up the head quite a bit until that's all you could see. And that's how they came up with these shapes. And I think that's an excellent example of this. And then if we look at the paintings, they really went all out using color to drive the idea home and using these shapes that they had. I mean, there's no way of knowing, or you're gonna be really hard pressed to figure out what part of what thing was blown up to make these shapes. But it's a beautiful example of abstract painting. And even if you can't identify exactly what the emotions are, you can tell that whatever it is, it's obviously there. There's something there, and there's something going on. This one I thought was interesting because this almost starts looking like a landscape, and it's not. If we go up to her drawings up here, it looks like it's actually based on one of the images for happiness, and she just did it completely different. It started there. It's interesting to me because there's no way of knowing what this started out as. And I just think that's fantastic. Do you want me to show you any more examples, or are you guys understanding this?
I think I'm good.
Okay. How about you, Paige, Lizzie, Nicole? You want to see any
Yeah,
more?
I'm good.
Okay. You guys got it?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, that abstraction is one of those things. Particularly these art forms that we're looking at right now, they can be really frustrating because you guys have been told your entire lives, as well as everybody living in North America and Europe and most of the rest of the world, that you're not supposed to be able to understand this stuff unless you run a gallery or have a lot of money. And I think that's absurd. I think it's ridiculous. And I'm hoping that whether or not you like any of this, I don't really care. What I'm hoping is that you appreciate that somebody was doing something with intent, and that's what we're looking at. Now, the contemporary art, this is what we're going to be talking about primarily this week, and this is something that is a little bit different. Uh, Contemporary, modern, and postmodern are all words that seem like they should mean the same thing. They should be synonyms, but they're not. And this is another thing that I think gallerists and critics have done specifically to drive a wedge between us as observers and the artists that we want to see their stuff. Um, because these words, which should be synonymous, mean very different things. And if you guys are going to be studying passive art, and we talk about this more in the future, we'll talk about this stuff in depth. But what modern means in the art world is not what's happening now. What it means is essentially art that is created as a result of essentially the invention of the train up to about the end of the Korean War. And that's about what it is. Because if you remember what happened after the train was invented and people started using it, what was the big art movement that happened?
Wasn't that Impressionism?
Exactly, exactly. And the thing that marks Impressionism as being so different from everything before is that it's the first time artists had the guts to show us what they were thinking, not what they thought everybody was expecting. And that's a big difference because everything before, people are trying to make stuff that seems at least relatively realistic, or at least for the most part. And with Impressionism, that was no longer a concern. Then the artists with things like communication technology and travel technology expanding so much, artists could find people that resonated with themselves. They found fans that liked the stuff that they were doing, and that's what fueled that to continue. And then after the turn of the century, that's when we start seeing Cubism, Dada, Surrealism, and moving forward into abstract. And then after the Korean War, uh, artists are thinking, okay, all this time we've kind of been telling people what's going on in our minds. And in even abstract stuff that's really hard to get, there's still a story behind it. It's still like somebody walking down a set of stairs, but in Cubism, you're doing all these different images from different perspectives. And in Surrealism, it's going to be a dream, but it's still related to an actual story of some sort or a portion of a story. After people got back from the Korean War, what is happening in the United States during the almost the entire decade of the 50s, it's really the first time that an average person with an average family was able to hold an average job that actually paid for an average house and an average car, and they could go on an average vacation, which marks, I mean, that's marks a financial freedom that nobody's had for thousands of years. With that, artists feel like they can start exploring other things and still provide for their families. They still feed the mouths that depend on them. And so in modern art, you're dealing with a story, but artists are exploring different ways of sharing that story, different techniques, different processes. And then right about the Korean, mid 50s, right around there, early 50s, right after World War II, in that whole time period, it starts shifting from telling the story to exploring what kind of materials people now have access to. Synthetic rubber never existed before World War II. Acrylic paint never existed before World War II. House paint, like we know it today, enamels and things like that, never existed before World War II. There's all these technologies that went to driving material production or the invention of materials that never existed in the history of the planet. And artists thought, okay, we've explored all this other stuff. Let's start exploring these materials. And that's when you start getting postmodern art. And the dividing line is right in that 1950s area. After World War II to about the time that Kennedy became president, that whole area, what else is going on in culture? We have this financial boom that is impacting everybody. Do any of you know what was going on at that time as well, culturally? What happened after World War II when the communists started taking over different countries?
Are
And
we talking about the Cold War?
exactly, the Cold War was happening. And that's when there was a low level of constant apprehension on the minds of everybody in the West because of, the Pinko Kami threat. And as well as that, what's the real fear that people are having from technology? This is I asked the question. I don't expect anybody to answer this, but um, throughout the late 50s, early 60s, this is when Toho Studios started. Do any of you guys know what Toho Studios is? Japanese filmmaking firm. They pretty much invented the giant monster movie trope. Okay, they're the guys that came up with Godzilla. How was Godzilla born? Do any of you guys know? An atomic bomb. Godzilla, these giant monsters, this kind of horror science fiction represented the very real threat of nuclear destruction. And our parents grew up watching these little 3-minute cartoons. You go to the movie theater, you watch something that would give a little bit of social media at the time. Then right before going into the main movie that you were there to watch, you see this little customer service message that would talk about what to do if you see the atomic blast on the horizon. What do you do in the event of nuclear warfare? And talking, showing all these little kids diving under desks and behind trees, behind rocks and parks and all this kind of stuff. What is that going to do to the mental state of all the people, all the kids, all the parents? So you have this constant level of stress right behind all this financial success, and I can really understand why artists are shifting into something different. And so from about end of World War II, 1950s, that area shifts into postmodern art. And postmodern art is when artists are not concentrating on the narrative so much as they're looking at process. They're looking at specifically materials. And this is where you start seeing art. And if you don't get it, that's fine. You got it. Because the artist is just making stuff to show what's possible. And then right around the 1980s, that's when we shift into contemporary art. Contemporary means essentially what's happening now, and it essentially is art that could not exist technologically before the present state of affairs or the lifespans of the people that are now currently alive. And this is where we get contemporary art is usually when people are starting to make art that is designed specifically to get you to think. And there are echoes of this throughout, like Hannah Hawk, we looked at her collages that were designed specifically to get you to think. That's kind of what the Dada movement was doing. But artists didn't start really exploring that quite a bit until right around the 60s and then going whole hog into the 80s when people are using technology, robots, video, all these kind of new art forms to explore completely new things that nobody even had the time, inclination, or possibility of exploring before about 1980, right around that time. So, a lot of these things do overlap, but that's roughly kind of what's going on. And I think in these modules, I do have, or in this module, I might have a video that talks about that a little bit if you guys are interested. But that's all coming up to what we're going to be doing for contemporary art. This section called Broken Open, this is where it really talks about some of these possibilities. And these are people that are postmodernists as well as contemporary artists, and mostly they've shifted into contemporary art. Now, Cicely Brown is really interesting. All these little shapes, what she's done is, and she is considered a very contemporary artist, she'll use a model. She'll look at a model and she'll find portions of that model that then she'll take and transfer onto the painting surface without any context to it. By portions of a model, what I'm saying is if she has somebody sitting in front of her and she sees this shape in the shoe, she'll paint that in the paintings in several different colors just that shape in several different spots. Then she'll go back over and maybe she likes this space, this fold of cloth, and she'll paint that and paint that in several different spots in these paintings. And that's how she develops her paintings. So she considers herself a figurative artist, but looking at her work, I mean, I can't tell. I don't particularly care for her stuff, but there are some people that really dig it. This is another example of her painting. I can't see where she gets the reference points for any of those things, but I just know as she talks about her artwork, she describes maybe this orange squiggle is actually the squiggle of the sunlight coming off the model's shoe. Maybe this shadow right here is the shadow by their armpit. I don't know, but she takes those different elements and just puts them around almost randomly on the painting. I don't really care for her stuff. Now this guy, I think this guy is a super genius. I think he's absolutely amazing. Jean-Michel Basquiat grew up in urban sprawl, really desperate economic environment, and the only thing that allowed him to survive was the promise of creation, making art. And so what he did is he made art based on graffiti and posting bills. I don't know if you guys have any of you been to like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, any really big, relatively old city like that, and you see areas where people have just pasted posters on walls and on uh, um, light posts and stuff like that. Somebody else came along, ripped them off, put something else on there. There's a particular layering of age with this kind of environment, and that's what he did. But he would make paintings that were just explorations of those kinds of images and things going on. And this is what you're going to be doing in your studio process, making something like this that looks like graffiti, essentially. And here's another painting. And if you guys have ever been to like oh, it's cleaned up quite a bit, but the Rio station in Salt Lake several years ago used to have stuff like this everywhere, not because people did it intentionally, just because it grew up that way organically. And we get one of the cast of Men in Black, Andy Warhol. Uh, he was actually a Rosicrucian, who is it's basically metaphysical Christian. And he actually did a series of paintings that were Stations of the Cross that got stolen in the late 70s, and nobody still has been able to locate them. Nobody knows where they are. But this guy, um, I know him through a friend of mine who was actually in the 1960s. She was an Italian adult film actress. She became a born again Christian in right around 1970 and worked in his studio with him and learned from him during the 70s. And her name was Ultraviolet. But really an amazing guy who took images like this using materials that were incredibly commonplace. So this is total social media meme image using very commonplace materials. But what he would do is organize them like the 14th, 15th century European tradition of icon painting. And doing that with soup cans and social media icons, different things like that, because what he was also doing is commenting on how commercial culture had become so elevated in American society that it had become almost a replacement for spirituality and religion. Now, he didn't talk about that except privately because when he would talk, he would specifically model his responses after vacuous movie stars, what they would say. And, the completely empty comments that people would make for magazines. So it was just very interesting guy. Betty Saar is one of my most favorite artists in the entire universe. I think she is absolutely astounding. Black American, incredibly well educated. Her parents were incredibly well educated and very successful. And what she started doing is exploring art using mass media imagery, communicating narratives and stories that were just designed as personal reflections. And then she backed up into social commentary. These images that she comes up with, like I think this one is absolutely beautiful. But she doesn't do it to make you feel a certain way or to make a political statement. She does it because she finds this imagery beautiful. And then after she creates it, she'll have conversations about it. And it just absolutely amazing stuff. But I like her because she's she looks like my favorite grandma, and her workshop is exactly like my workshop. Junk everywhere. Our spouses just don't want to get in the same room because it's they can't handle the chaos. So she's amazing. And then Yinke Shonibara is one of my heroes. I think he is astounding on many different levels because what he does, he's a student of Baroque, late Renaissance, Baroque, and Enlightenment culture in Europe, and he creates things where he uses West African cloth, but he puts them together in poses, these mannequins in poses that you will see in like Baroque style paintings or early 19th century Romantic paintings. But he uses West African cloth. This is cloth from Nigeria, and you have these Yoruba kind of carvings and stuff like that. And he designs his mannequins specifically so that they are not race specific. So everybody has the right to see themselves in this. And some of his stuff is just amazing. Like in this image, I see my daughters, all my daughters, and I think it's just amazing. And he also did one for little boys playing around, and I see myself and my brothers in it. It just I think his stuff is astounding. But so he's taking this imagery that is a couple hundred years old, but updating it with contemporary fabrics from different continents so that everybody can see themselves in what's going on. I just think it's wonderful. And then Marina Abramovich is really hard to deal with. And some people just don't get her stuff, and that's fine. But she will do performance pieces that are designed specifically to address particular thoughts that she has. And she puts a lot of energy into simple movements specifically to get you to start thinking, well, if she puts so much energy into it, maybe it's important. So maybe I should pay attention to what this is and think what could she be meaning. And if you talk about this, Mariko Mori in Japan did a lot of the same kind of stuff, but Marina Abramovich, she would do performances like this for hours in galleries where a couple would stand looking at each other. Still, they drop their arm, slowly raise their arm up, touch fingertips, drop it again, the whole time looking at each other. And it becomes a commentary on lack of true personal interaction. This, when she got married to her longtime collaborator, they both started at opposite ends of the Great Wall of China and filmed themselves going through the process of walking towards each other along the entire wall, and then finally got married when they finally met. And they filmed the whole thing. And this was, 25, 30 years ago, before social media became a thing. And this is where a lot of this stuff that you see today on Instagram and TikTok and things and YouTube, where a lot of those people got their inspiration for the kinds of content that they make came from Marina Abramovich. So this is when her and her husband right before they got married. So they both been walking for months towards each other. And this guy, he makes stuff that I think is just amazing. This is pollen that he took months to collect, and then he very carefully sifts it onto a large square and then allows and tells people what it is and then walks away from it. And people start thinking, well, he spent so much time collecting the pollen, so much time laying it down. It looks like a painting, but it's actually sifted pollen. With all that energy, what is he trying to say? And people start developing dialogues with an imaginal version of Wolfgang in their head, thinking about, okay, why is it pollen? Why is it a particular pollen from a particular plant? Why did he collect it only at this time of year? Why did he make it this big? And they're asking themselves these questions, and he starts getting them involved in developing in their own minds the meaning of the art. And I think that that's really fantastic. And now this picture, I mean, we can't. Okay, I'm going to have to find images for that. But El Anatsui is another superhero of mine. He started making stuff. You can't tell what this is. It just looks like cloth. It looks like a quilt. But he's from Ghana, and he was walking around and he found just a bag of garbage. And he started thinking, what can I do with this garbage? And the garbage he found were all these milk bottle lids. And so he started collecting that. And then he started making these tapestries that are just gigantic, um, and I want to share this with you, out of this garbage. And this particular image right here is made out of crushed beer cans and milk bottle lids and little bits of other bits of garbage. It uses copper wire to kind of weave it together. And I want you to think about this for a second. I don't know if you can guess how big this is, but this is actually about 15 feet tall and about 25 feet wide. It is gigantic. And you take little bits of garbage, you start putting it together on this scale, and it starts acting almost like a gigantic blanket or tapestry. And the kinds of things that he's suggesting to you to think about is, why does it have to stay garbage? Why did people decide it had to be thrown away in the first place? What can we do about it? And then how is he transforming the garbage into something else? And this almost becomes like a flag or a medieval tapestry that would be used to insulate a room or to decorate a room, and it is another thing that is amazing to me is by doing this, he will actually hire dozens of craftspeople to do this when he gets a grant for a project, and he will revitalize the economy of an entire town doing the art that he's doing. And I think it's pretty fantastic. And so when you write your reflection, think about each of those different artists. And what we're going to be doing for the studio is making our own street art. And you don't have to do this with wheat paste. I do give you directions on that. What you're basically going to be doing is doing two different things. The first thing is you're going to make a fake street art surface. And you can do this by getting a big piece of watercolor paper and dumping different random colors on it, ironing it through aluminum foil so you get different textures. You can apply textures with sprinkling salt on it or dirt, scrub it with sandpaper, paint over again. You're just trying to do something that gives you a surface that looks like it could belong in an urban environment. Several people will use wax crayons to draw the grout lines of bricks and then use several different kinds of paint to develop kind of this brick texture. And I want you to look up YouTube videos, how to generate different textures with watercolor and just make a fun urban texture with watercolor. And I'm going to show you a couple of those things from what people have done. So that's one thing. You make a background surface, and then the next thing is you make a number of stickers, and these stickers are reminiscent of what Basquiat did, and then you paste those stickers down onto your fake street surface. So I will show you what that looks like. Just a second here. Okay, and this is a really good example. I'm going to turn it right side up. The reason I say this is a good example is this person is not trying to do anything that's photorealistic, but can you see how the background paper in this case, they wrote on it with crayon, or they drew on it with crayon to get these uh, grout lines for the bricks. They scribbled on it, they crinkled it up, and then they splashed watercolor paints on it to get this kind of funky texture. Then separately, they wrote things down. They drew some basketballs, guitars, different stuff like that, tore the stickers out. And I'm calling them stickers. They're just pieces of paper, and then glued them on to this street surface that they made. And what I love about this, you can see how she made a lot of different stickers. They're not designed to look clean or pretty, but she overlapped them when she glued them down. She got them wet, they smeared, and this gives the appearance, just like that Basquiat painting, of age and layered activity. And that's really what we're going for. And I think she did a great job. And I want to show you another example. Okay, this one is a little bit more controlled. And you can see in this case, she made these stickers, colored them with oil pastels, and cut them out. And then the background, it looks like she made streaks with wax right here that kind of did a different texture. And then she made the background wet with orange and yellow paint, and then just did a bunch of daubs of green paint on top to get this texture. And then after that dried, then she glued these stickers on. Do you guys see what's going on? Does this page, Lizzie and Nicole, do you guys see what's going on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a
And
question.
yes,
Could I use like tissue paper on
for
it to
which
make
part
different
of it?
textures? Like the background?
That might be really interesting. How would you apply it?
I mean, I'd have to use like a glue of some sort, but just, and then I would like crinkle it up.
I think that could look really cool. If we still want to use paint and different things like that, what if you took the tissue paper, glued it onto the background paper, and painted over it, just kind of with random watercolor, and saw what that did, and maybe did a couple layers of that? That would be incredibly cool, and it would only take you. It wouldn't take very long to do that either. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, I was thinking about like how they use the bricks doing like the edging or something with it, and I can paint over it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that'd be really kind of fun. And we're not looking to replicate anything specifically. We're not looking to make like a clean finished product, but I think you have some really that's a really good idea. Now this one, I don't this one isn't as successful. I think the stickers in this one are really good. These are perfect. But the background, if they, I love how this background is starting, but I told them, do this. You crinkled it up just like what I think it was Paige was talking about. But if you got like a big brush and just did a couple light washes of watercolor through that, that would look incredibly cool, especially over the crayon and stuff like that. And I think what Paige is talking about with the tissue paper, that'd be really fun to see what that does. So we're looking for the background. We want to apply lots of color. We want it to be interesting. We want it to look kind of vaguely urban, or not even vaguely, but very urban. And I think this person did a really good job because you can see they drew on it with one thing. They went over it with a colored pencil. That's how they got these lines here. And then they painted it just with a whole bunch of very light watercolor and layered it. And I think, this looks almost like slats of wood rather than bricks. I think that's really cool. And on this, the way that they got this texture here is they actually took printer paper went outside on cement and just took a rubbing over the cement to get this kind of texture and that kind of texture. And then they went over it again with black crayon, or like in this case, purple, excuse me, purple crayon, to get some of these really interesting textures. And I looked up on YouTube, I looked up cool watercolor textures and organic watercolor textures, and it gave me some really interesting ideas. And this is the last one I'll show you. This person just started off as an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. They crinkled it up. They drew over it with crayon, and then they just splashed like 5 different colors of watercolor on it. And you can see how that interacts with the creases and folds of the crinkled up paper. And ideally, they should have more than one sticker. They should have several stickers on this. But I thought this looked pretty good. You know, for the first time ever doing anything like this turned out looking really cool. But does this part of the process make sense to you guys? Okay. Okay, we only have like 10 minutes left, and I'm going to talk about, we're going to talk about the final things next week, more like the final 5 paragraph essay and stuff like that. And I want to reiterate, don't worry too much about the due dates and stuff. We want to get everything done by the end of the first week of August. Is when everything is due. So, August 7th is what we're shooting for. And what I would really like you guys to do is over this next 2 weeks, pound out as much of this stuff as you can. And let's see how far we go. Now, for the final project with Dada, I want to walk through that, and we will talk more about it next week. And if you guys need me to, I can also do a separate video where I go into a little bit more depth and just send that out to everybody to watch. Let's see. And I'm trying to get this set up. Oh, this was a good example. Okay, good. All right. Let me share this with you. Now, how many of you guys remember the 4 tools of artistic critique? What's the first one?
Describe.
Describe. Excellent. What's the second one? Paige, Nicole, or Lizzie? And it starts with an A.
Analyze.
Yes, excellent, Nicole. And what's the third one? Paige or Lizzie? It starts with an I.
Sorry, I don't even know what we're talking about. My kids are screaming.
Oh, it's the tools of artistic critique. We have describe, analyze, and then the third step. Do you guys remember?
Interpret.
Yes, exactly. And then what's the fourth and final step? And this one starts with an E, V.
Evaluate.
Evaluate. Exactly. Perfect. What this exercise is we've been going back and looking at Sundiata, and when you wrote about the horseman and described the horseman, you use those 4 tools to describe it. And you guys all did an excellent job on that exercise. And then a couple of weeks ago, we were brainstorming about what kinds of things you could make using AI. And so what we're going to be doing is returning to our brainstorm, find 5 source images from the historic Mali Empire. So that's not Mali of 50 years ago, it's Mali from several hundred years ago. And you're going to build a prompt to have one of the AI image generators and I list several of them here, create your brainstormed object. And I want to show you some of the things fantastic things that people come up with. So after you do that, and you're going to very specifically talk to it about your 5 source images and 3 visual traits that you or materials you see in the source images. And these may be things like rustic or tan as a color, or terracotta as a material, or adobe as a material, or wood as a material. 3 different things that you notice consistent with the 5 source images that you've drawn from. And when your AI generates an image, you're going to look at it, decide on 3 things it needs to change, and save that image, then revise your prompt with those 3 things to change. And so that now you have 2 images, and then you're going to write 6 sentences about what you've done. And I give you very specifically what to write in those 6 sentences. Now, I want to show you examples of what people have done for this. And this is the first AI render. So basically, they want AI to generate a musical instrument consistent with what the art looked like from the old Mali Empire. And hopefully you guys can recognize some of that Genet style architecture in the back there, Malinese architecture. Then here's the second render. And what this person did is include both of these prompts, outlining the revisions that they made, and then they wrote the reflection, 1 sentence describing it, 1 sentence analyzing, 1 sentence interpreting, 1 sentence evaluating, 1 sentence comparing the first and second renders, and then finally 1 sentence just reflecting on the process. And here they gave the 5 visual sources that they referenced. This whole thing took her about an hour and 20 minutes coming up with all this. And and it's put together just exactly right. So they've generated 2 images, included the prompts for each of the images, described the revisions made, and then did that 6-sentence reflection and provided the 5 source images. Does this make sense to people? What's going on?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. And what is amazing, so the process is not, you're not sidestepping artistic creation using AI. What you're doing is directing the AI to make something with you that looks like it could possibly be an artifact of the old Mali Empire. If the Mali Empire continued unchanged for 700 years, what would some of this stuff look like? And this is one of the things that I really like too. One person who did this, her full-time profession is as a hairstylist, and so she thought, well, what would a Mali hair salon look like? And I thought that was very cool what she came up with. And a lot of this kind of stuff, you can see the visual references that she gave the AI. The AI drew from that to give the background and the setting and everything. And this doing the same kind of thing. The first image prompt with the 3 materials or traits that they wanted it to focus on, and second email prompt with the changes that they made, and then each of those 6 sentences, and then the 5 images. In this case, they use 6, but the source images as well. And I thought that's fantastic. Now, one of my favorites was somebody made a sports complex, and somebody else made like a UFO abduction scene, which I thought was fantastic. I don't know if I can find that in time. Oh, and then somebody wanted to do Mall of America, but done in ancient Mali. So these are the 5 source images that they picked. And so they made Mall of America. I thought that was really, really creative. You know, what would it look like if it was made in Mali 700 years ago? And then they did the 6 sentences and everything, and they included the visual references and stuff. Do those examples give you a pretty good idea of what this project entails?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, do any of you have questions about it? Nicole or Paige or Lizzie?
Not currently.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm good for right now.
Okay. And we will talk about this again, like next week as well. Um, and let's see, I want to show you, let's see, I want to find the calendar we were looking at. Because I don't want people to freak out or panic or anything like that. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share with you my screen so you can see the calendar. Okay, this is actually the academic calendar for fall semester. But what's important is, you know, we're up here, we're right here on this Tuesday. That's 2 week. So the end of the semester is 2.5 weeks away. End of finals is on the 7th. We're going to meet again on both this day, which is what, 31, 30, 29, 28. We're going to meet on July 28th, and we're going to meet on August 4th. On July 28th, I'm going to talk about what the final is. It's not a test like what you guys are used to. There's 4 questions that you guys need to answer, and you just write like 75 words on each of the 4 questions. And they're questions about your own personal experience. It is not a test on the material we covered for the semester. Okay? But I want you guys to be very clear. You have all the way up to midnight on the 7th to submit. And if Canvas is open on the 8th, you can also submit then. And if you need more time, you can talk to me and I will work things out because I believe grades are due on the 10th or the 12th is when grades are due. So we do have some fudge room. But I want everybody to know that because I don't want you guys, everybody's been doing pretty well for the most part. But with these assignments, as we get towards the end, we did kind of layer stuff up. Tell me if you're having a hard time and if you need more time. And I will do whatever I can so that you get as you know all your stuff turned in. So remember, go through everything that hasn't been turned in, turn it in, make the tweaks that I ask you to for stuff that has been turned in where you didn't get full points. Sometimes it's just adding a sentence, sometimes it's just doing a little bit more on the project, and then please email me if you have any more questions. Okay? Does this help everybody?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it helps me as well.
Paige. Okay, excellent. Lizzie, Nicole, do you guys have any questions or anything about the stuff that we went over and talked about?
No, I'm good. Thank you, though.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, excellent. Thank you guys. Thank you again for being here today. Like I said, it makes it so much less boring for me. I know that I've traumatized you just because my voice is so boring, but I do appreciate your sacrifice being here today. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing what you guys are turning in and submit over the next couple weeks. I want to remind you again, don't pay too much attention to the due dates. Just do the best you can and let me know what's going on. as you turn stuff in. Okay. And if you have any questions, let me know. But I'm happy to help. So thank you very much for being with me, guys, and I look forward to talking to you next Tuesday.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Thank
good
We'll see
you.
you.
week.
You too.